Alright, hello everyone. I'm Lonnie with the Untitled Nerd Network. And we are going to be, sorry I was just a couple minutes late, but we're going to take the opportunity tonight to kick back with some Scary Stories Treasury. This is the complete Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, more Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and Scary Stories 3, More Tales to Chill Your Bones. And so we're going to make it a point tonight to read a handful of tales from this, and very much looking forward to having you join us tonight. I'm going to jump right in, and remember, I will be taking requests tonight. If you have a specific story you would like read, so I'm going to be reading. Some of these are ones like we've done these story times before on our old YouTube channel. We're going to be doing some repeats. We're going to read a couple of things here and there. So, all right, I'm going to kind of disappear while we're reading, and that way I want you guys to be focusing more on the story and less on me. So I'm going to disappear, and then we're going to read some stories. The first story that I'm going to read is from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the first book, titled Cold as Clay. A farmer had a daughter for whom he cared more than anything on earth. She fell in love with a farmhand named Jim, but the farmer did not think Jim was good enough for his daughter. To keep them apart, he sent her to live with her uncle on the other side of the county. Soon after she left, Jim got sick and he wasted away and died. Everyone said he died of a broken heart. The farmer felt so guilty about Jim's death he could not tell his daughter what had happened. She continued to think about Jim and the life they might have had together. One night, many weeks later, there was a knock on her uncle's door. When the girl opened the door, Jim was standing there. "Your father asked me to get you," he said. "I came on his best horse." "Is there anything wrong?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. She packed a few things, and they left. She rode behind him, clinging to his waist. Soon he complained of a headache. "It aches something terrible," he told her. She put her hand on his forehead. "Why, you are as cold as clay," she said. "I hope you are not ill." And she wrapped her handkerchief around his head. They traveled so swiftly that in a few hours they reached the farm. The girl quickly dismounted and knocked on the door. Her father was startled to see her. "Didn't you send for me?" she asked. "No, I didn't," he said. She turned to Jim, but he was gone, and so was the horse. They went to the stable to look for him. The horse was there. It was covered with sweat and trembling with fear, but there was no sign of Jim. Terrified, her father told her the truth about Jim's death. Then quickly he went to see Jim's parents. They decided to open his grave. The corpse was in its coffin, but around his head they found the girl's handkerchief. Dun dun dun. The end of that story. Remember, if you're watching and you want a specific story from the Scary Stories Treasury, we have all three stories here. Hey, Noah, I don't think I'd call myself a meme lord, but I mean, I am the one who runs the page. Oh, for the most part, Amber does a lot of. I'm the one who's on the all the videos and stuff. Amber's the one who posts most of our memes. Kind of flipping through here. I kind of came in without a game plan. Just kind of flipping through, seeing if we have anything. Ah, here's a classic, y'all. Great classic. This is borrowed from a lot of other tales, but you'll get this. This story is called The Hook. Donald and Sarah went to the movies. Then they went for a ride in Donald's car. They parked up on a hill at the edge of town. From there, they could see the lights up and down the valley. Donald turned on the radio and found some music, but an announcer broke in with a news bulletin. A murderer had escaped from a state prison. He was armed with a knife and was headed south on foot. His left hand was missing. In its place, he wore a hook. Let's roll up the windows and lock the doors, said Sarah. That's a good idea, said Donald. That prison isn't too far away, said Sarah. Maybe we really should go home. But it's only 10 o'clock, said Donald. I don't care what time it is, she said. I want to go home. Look, Sarah, said Donald. He's not going to climb all the way up here. Why would he do that? Even if he did, all the doors are locked. How could he get in? Donald, he could take that hook and break through a window and open a door, she said. I'm scared. I want to go home. Donald was annoyed. Girls always are afraid of something, he said. And he started the car. Sarah thought she heard someone or something scratching at her door. Did you hear that? She asked as they roared away. It sounded like somebody was trying to get in. Oh, sure, said Donald. Soon they got to her house. Would you like to come in and have some cocoa? She asked. No, he said. I've got to go home. He went around to the other side of the car to let her out. Hanging on the door handle was a hook. Oh, let's see here. Hey, Sabrina, welcome to the stream. Yeah, feel free to let everybody know we're reading tonight. This is kind of a, everybody shut in with the coronavirus and social distancing. And it seems like everybody and their brother's doing some kind of story time and I'm doing something that's both kid-oriented, and then tomorrow night, God only knows how long it's going to take. But tomorrow night, we are going to be reading a selection from Stephen King's Skeleton Crew. And we'll be reading the story, The Jaunt. And that's going to be a heck of a little thing. I've read the story just a couple of times. And in my opinion, it's probably it's probably the scariest story I've ever read. I'm supposed to be doing homework. Hey, Shauna! No, it's all good. People can talk as they want. If anybody, if nobody knows the name of a story or anything, it's all good. But if you have a request, I will. Feel free to. All you got to do is just hop in and say, "Hey, can you do the one about, that thing?" Like, you don't even have to know the name of it. All you got to do is just hop in and be like, "Hey, there was a story, about these two kids. They had a drum, that kind of thing." Let's see here. Here's a nice one. This is one is oh yeah. As far as the actual coronavirus rules are concerned, no, nobody's following anything. Okay. Yeah, okay. I'm just now like kind of happening upon I was looking on my phone and apparently I'm missing a bunch of comments that are going on here. Okay. What do we got? Okay, this one here. Yeah, the whole world can't behave. Not at all. But, we're promoting social distancing. We're promoting you staying in your house by giving you at least some mediocre entertainment. So here we go. This one is more on the humorous side. This one is called The Bad News. Leon and Todd loved baseball when they were young. They had played on the town's baseball team. Leon had been the pitcher, and Todd had played second base. Now they were a lot older. They spent their free time watching baseball games on TV and talking about baseball. Do you think they play baseball in heaven? Leon asked Todd one day. That's a good question, said Todd. The one who gets there first should let the other one know somehow. As it turned out, Todd got to heaven first, and Leon waited patiently to hear from him. One day, Leon found Todd sitting in the living room waiting for him. Leon was very excited to see him. "What's it like up there?" he asked. "And what about baseball?" "When it comes to baseball," said Todd, "I have some good news and I have some bad news. The good news is we do play baseball in heaven. We have some fine teams. I play second base on my team just like I used to in the old days. That's the good news." "What's the bad news?" asked Leon. "The bad news," said Todd, "is that you're scheduled to pitch tomorrow." Da da. Sounded like Leon was getting ready to die. Okay. Anybody got any specific requests that you would like to have read? We're already a quarter of the way through the broadcast. And no, it's not mediocre. I just like playing that game. Here we go. This is a good one. This one is from Scary Stories 2. More scary stories to tell in the dark. I don't. Yeah, are you being serious with the worms crawl in? Let me look in the table of contents. I'm not totally familiar with that particular story. I'm kind of like looking through here right now. We're I'm making a point to try to find this. Gotta not finding it so far. It must be a number 3, and if it is, that's gonna be one I'm probably less familiar with. That has to be like a whole other one. The worms. That's very interesting because for whatever reason, yeah, that poem or whatever it is not in here. I think they did have one that was like in one of the later books that I don't think is included in this one, and it was more lighthearted, funny, um, more lighthearted, funny type stuff. Matter of fact, I think if I'm not mistaken, the pictures, the art was very colorful and not like the creepy black and white. It looked almost like something out of a hippie's trip or something. I mean, it looked like a LSD trip. Some of the pictures did. Okay, here we go. This one, I believe, is from the second book, More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. We'll get to that here in just a second, Shauna. Suzanne, this is called Oh Susanna. Susanna and Jane shared a small apartment near the university where they were students. When Susanna got back from the library one night, the lights were out and Jane was asleep. Susanna undressed in the dark and quietly got into bed. She had almost fallen asleep when she heard someone humming the tune to the song, Oh Susanna. "Jane," she said, "please stop humming. I want to get some sleep." Jane didn't answer, but the humming stopped and Susanna fell asleep. She awakened early the next morning, too early, she decided, and was trying to get back to sleep when she heard the humming again. "Please go back to sleep," she told Jane. "It's too early to get up." Jane didn't answer, but the humming continued. Susanna became angry. "Cut it out," she said. "It's not funny." When the humming still did not stop, she lost her temper. She jumped out of bed, pulled the covers off Jane, and screamed. Jan's head was gone. Somebody had cut off her head. "I'm having a nightmare," Susanna told herself. "When I wake up, everything will be all right." The end of that one. Okay, the Hearst song. Let's see if I can find this. I'm going to go ahead and tell you I'm not going to sing it, and I don't know how to read music. But I'll work with you. I'll at least read it. I'm pretty sure this is in the second one. I think this is in the second book. But now I'm not so sure. Maybe in the third one. Kind of clicking through here. Maybe I just have a horrible time finding. Uh, I'm just having a hard time finding titles in here. But I'm giving it a go, y'all. Give me just a second. I'm kind of bouncing around here through all the books trying to find specific selections. I know the Hearst song is in here because I passed right by it just a little bit ago. Seem to be having a heck of a time here. Yeah, Shauna requested it and she can't remember where it's at either. That is pretty funny, actually. Let's see. I'm like, big part of me is wanting to say that it's in number 3, but I've not seen it. Um, there's the dead hand. Thought it was in like a funny section. Wow, I'm having a heck of a time here. Oh my god, I hope I'm not losing the crowd. That's okay. This is a little crazy. For whatever reason, I'm not able to find it. Nope, there it is. Page 39. Yes, this is a little, it's a poem, but I think it's kind of a song. The Hearst song, as requested by Shauna Miller, and it took me half the stream to find it. Here we go. Don't you ever laugh as the hearse goes by, for you may be the next to die. They wrap you up in a big white sheet from your head down to your feet. They put you in a big black box and cover you up with dirt and rocks. All goes well for about a week, then your coffin begins to leak. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the worms play pinochle, I think, on your snout. They eat your eyes, they eat your nose, they eat the jelly between your toes. A big green worm with rolling eyes crawls in your stomach and out your eyes. Your stomach turns a slimy green and pus pours out like whipping cream. You spread it on a slice of bread and that's what you eat when you are dead. That is that is something. Hey there, Jenny. Welcome to our story time tonight. You know, I've read that before, but that's one of the things that even as a kid I was grossed out by that. That's funny. Let's see. What else do we have? I'm kind of bouncing around. We'll find some good ones. Here you go. This is actually the background that we're using right now. The house. This story is from the first book, and it is called The Guests. A young man and his wife were on a trip to visit his mother. Usually they arrived in time for supper, but they had gotten a late start and now it was getting dark. So they decided to look for a place to stay overnight and go on in the morning. Just off the road, they saw a small house in the woods. Maybe they rent rooms, the wife said, so they stopped to ask. An elderly man and woman came to the door. They didn't rent rooms, they said, but they would be glad to have them stay overnight as their guests. They had plenty of room and they would enjoy the company. The old woman made coffee and brought out some cake, and the four of them talked for a while. Then the young couple were taken to their room. They again explained that they wanted to pay for this, but the old man said he would not accept any money. The young couple got up early the next morning before their host had awakened. On a table near the front door, they left an envelope with some money in it for the room. Then they went on to the next town. They stopped in a restaurant and had breakfast. When they told the owner where they had stayed, he was shocked. That can't be, he said. That house burned to the ground, and the man and the woman who lived in it died in the fire. The young couple could not believe it, so they went back to the house. Only now there was no house. All they found was a burned out shell. They stood staring at the ruins, trying to understand what had happened. Then the woman screamed. In the rubble was a badly burned table, like the one they had seen by the front door. On the table was the envelope they had left that morning. That was fantastic. I almost feel like that's probably a TV show somewhere, like an episode of The Twilight Zone or something like that. The Slithery D. Is that the actual name? Yes, it is. I think I know where it's at. I'm going to have to find it, though. There it is, 78. It's actually not far from not far from what we read. Oh, I remember this one. This is actually pretty funny. This one is called The Slithery D by request of Jenny. The slithery D, he came out of the sea. He ate all the others, but he didn't eat me. The slithery D, he came out of the sea. He ate all the others, but he didn't eat Slurp. Oh, it does so well for the pictures. So hold on a second. There we go. Okay, this is what we're looking at. I'll show you. I'll show you. Oh no. That's what we're that's the actual story right there. So those are the pictures that you're looking at as I'm reading, which is pretty freaking funny. Like the stories. Um, whoa, what's going on there? Come on, there we go. Yeah, I don't know what was happening. Okay, so we are about to read another one. I'm gonna disappear, kind of like Thanos snap, and let's see. This one I believe is from book 2, and it is called One Sunday Morning. One Sunday Morning, book 2. That's um, actually fitting because today is technically Sunday. Ida always went to the 7 o'clock Sunday morning service at her church. Usually she heard the clanging of the church bells while she was eating breakfast, but this morning she heard them while she was still in bed. That means I'm late, she thought. Ida jumped out of bed, quickly dressed, and left without eating or looking at the clock. It was still dark outside, but it usually was dark at this time of year. Ida was the only one on the street. The only sound she heard were the clatter of her shoes on the pavement. Everybody must already be in church, she thought. Ida took a shortcut through the cemetery. Then she quietly slipped into the church and found a seat. The service had already begun. When she caught her breath, Ida looked around. The church was filled with people she had never seen before, but the woman next to her did look familiar. Ida smiled at her. It's Josephine Kerr, she thought. But she's died. She died a month ago. Suddenly, Ida felt uneasy. She looked around again, and as her eyes began to adjust to the dim light, Ida saw some skeletons in suits and dresses. This is a service for the dead, Ida thought. Everybody here is dead except me. Ida noticed that some of them were staring at her. They looked angry, as if she had no business there. Josephine Kerr leaned toward her and whispered, "Leave right after the benediction if you care for your life." When the service came to an end, the minister gave his blessing. "The Lord bless and keep you," he said. "The Lord make his face to shine upon you." Ida grabbed her coat and walked quickly toward the door. When she heard footsteps behind her, she glanced back. Several of the dead were coming toward her. Others were getting up to join them. "The Lord lift up his countenance to you," the minister went on. Ida was so frightened, she began to run. Out the door she ran, with a pack of shrieking ghosts at her heels. "Get out," one of them screamed. Another shouted, "You don't belong here," and ripped her coat away. As Ida ran through the cemetery, a third grabbed the hat from her head. "Don't come back," it screamed, and shook its arm at her. By the time Ida reached the street, the sun was rising and the dead had disappeared. Did this really happen, Ida asked herself, or have I been dreaming? That afternoon, one of Ida's friends brought over her coat and hat, or what was left of them. They had been found in the cemetery, torn to shreds. Fantastic little story. One Sunday Morning was the name of that. I have one that I would love to read to all of you. Let me see if I can find it. Well, I just found one that I really want to read. I've got a couple others. Kind of looking through. Remember, if you're with us tonight and you would like to specifically request, a particular story, feel free to hop in and request it in the chat. We've got close to another half hour left, so I'd be happy to read any of the stories from the 3 Scary Stories books. This next one I'm going to read is called The Dead Man's Hand. All right. The students at the school for nurses got along quite well with one another, except for Alice. The trouble with Alice was that she was perfect. At least that is how it seemed to the other students. She was always friendly and always cheerful. Nothing ever upset her. Her school assignments were always on time and always perfect. She didn't even bite her fingernails. Many of the student nurses resented Alice. They would have liked to see her fail at something, become frightened or cry, or do something that showed she had weaknesses like they did. One night, several students tried to frighten Alice with a practical joke. They borrowed the hand of a corpse they had been studying in anatomy and tied it to the light cord on her closet. When she tried to turn on the light, she would find herself holding a dead man's hand. "That would scare anybody," one of them said. "If it doesn't scare her, nothing will." After tying the hand in place, they went to the movies. When they got back, Alice was asleep. When they didn't notice her the next morning, they decided to find out what had happened. There was no sign of Alice in her room, but they soon found her. She was sitting on the floor in her closet, staring at the dead man's hand and mumbling to herself. Alice didn't even look up. The joke had worked, but nobody was laughing. Thus concludes The Dead Man's Hand. That was one of the first stories that I ever read as a kid that didn't have at least some type of happy ending. And it kind of opened up my mind to a lot of literary possibilities when writing was that the stories didn't have to always end, with smiles. It wasn't like a to be continued where everything might wrap up next week on the next episode or in the next chapter. Nope. That one was a pretty rough ending there. Here's an interesting one. This one was called The Brown Suit. A woman came to the funeral parlor to see her husband's corpse. "You did a good job," she said to the undertaker. "He looks just the way he always looked, except for one thing. My husband always wore a brown suit, but you have him dressed in a blue suit." "That's no problem," said the undertaker. "We can easily change it." When she returned later, her husband was wearing a brown suit. "Now he looks just the way he always did," she said. "I know you went to a lot of trouble." "It was no trouble," he said. "As it happened, there is a man here who was wearing a brown suit, and his widow felt that blue would be better. He is about your husband's size, so we gave him the blue one and your husband the brown one." "Even so," she said, "changing all that clothing was a big job." "Not really," said the undertaker. "All we did was exchange their heads." Well, that's a plot twist you didn't see coming. That's a regular M. Night Shyamalan plot twist. Hey there, Jordy. Love these. Got all the books. Finally saw the movie the other day. The movie to me had some scary parts. But on a scale of 1 to 10, I rank that movie about a 3 or a 4. I didn't care for the movie overall. I think a big part of it was I went into the movie hoping for like a little anthology series of like 3 or 4 stories. 3 or 4 of these stories maybe tied together by some common thread. But instead, it was just like another Goosebumps ripoff where, the stories come to life in the real world and a bunch of kids are running from the monsters. It's like a overdone shtick at this point. But, I mean, I was happy we at least got a movie. I think Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark would be better as like a Are You Afraid of the Dark type, um, episodic show that would, it would do pretty good in like, maybe 10 episodes a season on Netflix or something, Maybe make it animated with this art style or, something like that. But anyway, I don't want to I don't want to sit here and gripe about the current affairs of children's horror programming too much. We'll pop over into something else. This is a fun one. I love this story. Remember, if anybody else has any request for a specific story, throw them in the chat, and I will try my absolute best to read them if we haven't read it already tonight. Okay, this one is from Scary Stories 3. This one is it's an animal story. It's called Bess. John Nicholas raised horses. He had many horses of all kinds, but his favorite was Bess, a gentle old mare he had grown up with. He no longer rode her, for all she could do now was just amble along. Bess spent her days grazing peacefully in a meadow. That summer, for the fun of it, John Nicholas went into a fortune teller's booth. The fortune teller studied her cards. "I see danger ahead for you," she said. "Your favorite horse will cause you to die. I don't know when, but it will happen. It is in the cards." John Nicholas laughed. The idea that Bess could cause his death was nonsense. She was as dangerous as a bowl of soup. Yet from then on, whenever he saw her, he remembered the fortune teller's warning. That fall, a farmer from the other end of the county asked if he could have Bess. He had been thinking that the old horse would be perfect for his children to ride. "That's a good idea," John said. "It would be fun for them, and it would give Bess something to do." Later, John told his wife about it. "Now Bess won't kill me," he said, and they both laughed. A few months later, he saw the farmer who had taken her. "How's my Bess?" he asked. "Oh, she was fine for a while," the farmer said. "The children loved her. Then she got sick. I had to shoot her to put her out of her misery. It was a shame." Despite himself, John breathed a sigh of relief. He had often wondered if, in some crazy way, through some strange accident, Bess would kill him. Now, of course, she could not. "I'd like to see her," said John, "just to say goodbye. She was my favorite." The bones of the dead horse were in a far corner of the man's farm. John kneeled down and patted Bess's sun-bleached skull. Just then a rattlesnake, which had made its home inside the skull, sunk its fangs into John Nicholas's arm and killed him. Now that was intense. Very much so. Alright, we are at 9:40. I tell you what, if we don't get if y'all want to, feel free to throw a request in here. I gotta ask for a request in between each story. If we don't get, I'm actually gonna do a fairly long story now. It's about 5 pages, and if we don't get any requests during the time that this story is read, we'll probably wrap it up. I just wanted to get on here and do a little bit of reading for everybody. Take me a drink real quick. This one was a big part of the movie, actually. This one is called Harold. When it got hot out in the valley, Thomas and Alfred drove their cows up to a cool green pasture in the mountains to graze. Usually they stayed there with the cows for 2 months, and then they brought them back down to the valley again. The work was easy enough, but oh, it was boring. All day the two men tended their cows. At night they went back to the tiny hut where they lived. They ate supper and worked in the garden and went to sleep. It was always the same. Then Thomas had an idea that changed everything. "Let's make a doll the size of a man," he said. "It'd be fun to make, and we could put it in the garden to scare away the birds." "It should look like Harold," Alfred said. Harold was a farmer they both hated. They made the doll out of old sacks stuffed with straw. They gave it a pointy nose like Harold's and tiny eyes like his. Then they added dark hair and a twisted frown. Of course, they also gave it Harold's name. Each morning, on their way to the pasture, they tied Harold to a pole in the garden to scare away the birds. Each night, they brought him inside so that he wouldn't get ruined if it rained. When they were feeling playful, they would talk to him. One of the men might say, "How are the vegetables growing today, Harold?" Then the other, making believe he was Harold, would answer in a crazy voice, "Very slowly." They would both laugh, but not Harold. Whenever something went wrong, they took it out on Harold. They would curse at him, even kick him or punch him. Sometimes one of them would take the food they were eating, which they both were sick of, and smear it on the doll's face. "How do you like that stew, Harold?" he would ask. "Well, you better eat it, or else." Then the two men would howl with laughter. One night, after Thomas had wiped Harold's face with food, Harold grunted. "Did you hear that?" Alfred asked. "It was Harold," Thomas said. "I was watching him when it happened. I can't believe it." "How could he grunt?" Alfred asked. "He's just a sack of straw. It's not possible." "Let's throw him in the fire," said Thomas, "and that will be that." "Let's not do anything stupid," said Alfred. "We don't know what's going on. When we move the cows down, we'll leave him behind. For now, let's just keep an eye on him." So they left Harold sitting in a corner of the hut. They didn't talk to him or take him outside anymore. Now and then the doll grunted, but that was all. After a few days, they decided there was nothing to be afraid of. Maybe a mouse or some insects had gotten inside Harold and were making those sounds. So Thomas and Alfred went back to their old ways. Each morning they put Harold out in the garden, and each night they brought him back into the hut. When they felt playful, they joked with him. When they felt mean, they treated him as badly as ever. Then one night, Alfred noticed something that frightened him. Harold is growing, he said. I was thinking the same thing, Thomas said. Maybe it's just our imagination, Alfred replied. We've been up here on this mountain too long. The next morning, while they were eating, Harold stood up and walked out of the hut. He climbed up on the roof and trotted back and forth like a horse on its hind legs. All day and all night long he trotted like that. In the morning, Harold climbed down and stood in a far corner of the pasture. The men had no idea what he would do next. They were afraid. They decided to take the cows down into the valley that same day. When they left, Harold was nowhere in sight. They felt as if he had escaped a great danger and began joking and singing. But when they had gone only a mile or two, they realized they had forgotten to bring the milking stools. Neither one wanted to go back for them, but the stools would cost a lot to replace. There really is nothing to be afraid of, they told one another. After all, what could a doll do? They drew straws to see which one would go back. It was Thomas. I'll catch up with you, he said, and Alfred walked on toward the valley. When Alfred came to a rise in the path, he looked back for Thomas. He did not see him anywhere, but he did see Harold. The doll was on the roof of the hut again. As Alfred watched, Harold kneeled and stretched out a bloody skin to dry in the sun. Oh, sounded like Harold might have killed Thomas. All right, y'all. We have been going for 45 minutes now. Thank you very much for coming by and hanging out with us tonight. We're going to be back on tomorrow night. Pretty sure we're going to be able to do this. We're going to be reading The Jaunt by Stephen King. This is I'm going to look and see how many pages it is. It's not too awful long. It's about a 23 page little story about teleportation in the future and the side effects. That's the best way I know how to describe it. Great little book. We'll be back tomorrow night reading the complete The Jaunt by Stephen King tomorrow night. This has been Lonnie with Untitled Nerd Network. This has been Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. The Treasury, we've been reading selected stories out of it. And we'll be back tomorrow night with a short story by Stephen King. Everybody have a good night. Thanks for watching.